والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء حبيب قلوبنا وشفيع ذنوبنا أبي القاسم محمد. اللهم صل على محمد وعلى محمد. والصلاة والسلام على أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المظلومين، لا سيما ولي الله الحجة ابن الحسن صاحب الأمر والزمان. اللهم صل على محمد وعلى محمد. روحي وأرواح العالمين له الفداء، ولعنة الله على أعدائهم أجمعين من الأولين والآخرين إلى قيام يوم الدين. أما بعد، قال الله تعالى في محكم كتابه الحكيم: بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. ظهر الفساد في البر والبحر بما كسبت أيدي الناس ليذيقهم بعض الذي عملوا لعلهم يرجعون. صدق الله العلي العظيم وآمنا به. زينوا مجالسكم بذكر محمد وآل محمد. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. أحسنت. Despite the fact that we live in the 21st century, and despite the fact that man has generally made great progressions in regards to knowledge and technology, you still find that the world in which we live is plagued by poverty, oppression, and tyranny. Statistics show, World Bank, for example, states that up to 2 billion people who live on this world today live with an income of close to or less than $2.5 a day, $2.5 a day. Close to a third of this world's population lives with an income of less than $2.5 a day. On the other hand, World Health Organization statistics show that close to 21,000 children die per day due to malnutrition or lack of access to basic medical care. In addition to this, we have close to 50 present-day countries that are involved in armed conflicts, and the bloodshed that arises and the death which is caused due to this violence. Taking an example of Iraq in its own, statistics show that on a daily basis 100 Shia are killed daily. On a daily basis 100 Shia are killed. The impact in regards to the widows left behind and the orphans left behind, all this crime, all this poverty, all this oppression happening at a day and age when technology and knowledge is supposed to be at its peak. Therefore, we come forward and we ask the question, why is there global oppression? Why is there global poverty despite the fact that we have access to knowledge and technology exists? To answer this question, we need to ask ourselves another question while answering this first, in the form of an introduction. Is knowledge or is technology on its own sufficient to enable mankind to prosper at a global level or no? The answer that we come up to is no. Knowledge on its own, technology on its own is not sufficient to bring global prosperity to man, and the current events and the state of the world proves our point. The answer then, or the question that comes forward, is how do we come to this conclusion? No. When we are stating that knowledge and technology on its own is not sufficient to bring the world to the highest level of prosperity and bliss, the answer is hidden through our understanding of deen in its entirety. Allama al-Hilli, rahmatullah alayh, in his book, which is a basic text taught within the Hawza Ilmiya known as Babul Hadi Ashar, In the opening chapters, he makes or he puts forward for us the definition of deen, in that he states that deen huwa nidhamun li husul as-sa'ada fi ad-darain, yani fi ad-dunya wal-akhirah. The definition of deen, or the definition of religion, is that it is an entire system that helps us, or that facilitates for mankind to attain bliss and prosperity both in the dunya as well as in the akhirah. You find that the deen caters for the happiness of mankind in the dunya as well as in the akhirah. If we understand this definition of deen, then we understand that religion, Islam, has a political system which is the best of political systems. It has a financial and an economic system which is the best of financial and economic systems. It has a social system in place which is the best of systems. The problem with Muslims in general is that when deen is restricted to the ibadat, when deen is restricted only to salat and saum. Salat and saum are important aspects of our religion. Salat, amududdin, is the central pillar of religion, no doubt about its importance. However, the parameters of Islam are much wider than what we traditionally think Islam is restricted to. No, Islam's parameters and boundaries are much wider than this, which is why we say that Islam is a way of life, in that the rules and regulations that Islam gives us encompasses every aspect of our life. Therefore, we come forward and we say that knowledge or technology, if it is not encompassed by the deen, if it is not encompassed by religion or Islam, then this knowledge and technology becomes more destructive for mankind than beneficial. See, in answering this question or understanding this issue, why does global poverty and oppression and tyranny exist despite the fact that we have made advances when it comes to knowledge and advances when it comes to technology? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala answers this question for us within the Quran itself. You find in Surah Ar-Rum verse 41, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, ظهر الفساد في البر والبحر بما كسبت أيدي الناس ليذيقهم بعض الذي عملوا لعلهم يرجعون. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that the corruption, ظهر الفساد, corruption and oppression and poverty, everything that comes under fasad, corruption, has become rampant. Why? بما كسبت أيدي الناس, because of the actions of mankind itself. Bima kasabat aydin nas is literally translated by what the hands have earned, yani the actions of the people. People in themselves are responsible for the corruption and the poverty that exists today. What exactly does this mean? Aydin nas, or dhahar al-fasad في البر والبحر بما كسبت أيدي الناس. This statement بما كسبت أيدي الناس, in that oppression has become rampant because of the actions of the people. What exactly does this statement mean? Mufassirin have been able to give us three different type of interpretations, or three different dimensions through which we are able to understand the root causes for which corruption and oppression prevails in the world that we live today. The first one of them, as per the Mufassirin, is that we submit to man-made laws instead of divinely made laws. The reason being that man-made laws, especially when it comes to the issues of politics and the issues of economics, generally, a majority of the times, man-made laws are created or devised to benefit a minority at the expense of a majority. Therefore, the rule that is being put in place is there for the benefit of only a few number of people at the expense of a general majority. And you find that this rule and this philosophy is absolutely clear in today's political and today's economic landscape. Submission to man-made laws instead of Islamic laws is a reason for most of the poverty and the corruption that we face today. And we take a few examples. From an economic perspective, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala through Islam has given us the best financial and economic system, a system which allows every human being to prosper, not a system whereby some individuals prosper at the expense of others. We take, for example, the issue of taxation. Within the modern economic system, speaking at a very general level, we are taxed 20 or 30% based on our gross income. Inta Janab, you go and you work the entire month on a 9-to-5 job, you toil, after all your efforts, you take home a check, but even before you can spend the fruit of your hard work, 20 or 30% of this income is deductible, tax deductible, in that it goes towards the taxation of the government. Taxation or taxes, generally income tax, in a non-Islamic economy, the economies in which we live, is based on the income that we earn. Enter Janab, before you go home, 20-30% of your hard-earned money goes to a government. You come now and you see, even when it comes to Western societies, a large number of the people who are within the middle class or who are struggling in the lower class are not able to live a lifestyle which is hand to mouth. Ajib. Are not able to live a lifestyle which is hand to mouth. Why? Because this net income after tax income which they take, they find that majority of the times they fall short in meeting their expenditures by this amount of 20-30%. Had this amount not been taxed, then majority of these people would be able to make their ends meet. However, when you come to Islam, you come to the teachings of Ahlul Bayt, you find that the concept of taxation is absolutely separate. In Islam, the type of taxes under an Islamic government which runs as per the principles of Ahlul Bayt, the taxation system revolves around khums, zakat, the jizya, and the khiraj. The khiraj, which is a sort of a land tax, but generally speaking, zakat being a tax on agricultural or certain agricultural products or livestock, jizya, an issue which needs a bahath in its own, where you have non-Islamic citizens of the state who are paying a tax as opposed to paying the khums and the zakat. This is a tax that they pay in exchange to khums, because if you have a non-Muslim living within a Muslim land who has the freedom to practice his religion, la ikraha fid deen, because he doesn't believe in your religion, you cannot impose a tax on him. Yet at the same time, the government needs an income to provide infrastructures through which the non-Muslim and the Muslim will also benefit. Therefore, because the non-Muslim is not obliged to pay the khums, he pays the jizya. It is not a discriminatory tax as we find is portrayed within the media. In either case, you find that taxation in Islam has a totally different perspective. If we understand that khums is a form of taxation that the citizen of the state pays to an Islamic government, to the government of the time, look at the rahmah within the laws of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Tax is not paid on income, tax is paid on savings. Allahu Akbar. If you were to change the entire economic system of the world, where a taxation system exists not on the income that you earn, but on the savings that you make, 20% of the savings, straight away this big chunk of a middle class and the lower class which lives on an income where they can barely make it hand to mouth, you find that all of a sudden they have 20 to 30% of a disposable income, higher than what they previously had. Higher disposable income as per general economic theories means what? Higher standard of living. Higher standard of living, lower cases of poverty, lower cases of poverty, lower cases of crime, which means even government spending when it comes to tackling issues of crime have reduced. And therefore, the income needed by the government for that particular budget decreases. You find inside of Islam, the financial benefit of a government is tied to the financial success of the people. In that financial success of a government and financial success of the people, the relationship between these two entities is one that has a positive correlation. The more the people financially grow, the better the government is placed. The success of a government is tied to the success of the people, unlike what we find today, where the success of the government is at the expense of the local people. Who is there to show and to propagate? Sallu ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Who is there to show and propagate this system of Islam, this approach of Islam when it comes to solving global economic issues? The answer can only be with Ahlul Bayt. And the examples in this field are numerous. Yeah, subhanallah, you find, I don't know how the system works over here, but in a number of the Western countries you find that one of the greatest tensions that a person has is that before he dies, the wealth that he leaves behind, an X amount of that wealth is going to be taxed by the government. Inheritance tax, Sahilola, I don't know if we have inheritance tax over here in Uganda, but in other places in the West, up to 40% of your wealth can be taxed. Inheritance tax. Inta Janab Miskin, you worked your entire life, your entire efforts to put together wealth such that you can then pass on this wealth to your children and they can have a decent standard of living. What right does the government have to come and take 40%? Government has not been placed to control the wealth of the people. Rather, as per an political Islamical thinking, the government is elected to facilitate the growth and the success of the people, as per the teachings of Amirul Mu'mineen and Ahlul Bayt. Do you know that during the time of Amirul Mu'mineen Ali ibn Abi Talib salawatullahi wa salamuhu alayhi, for the 4 odd years that he had rulership over the government and the Zahiri position of Khilafah was given to him, do you know during these 4 odd years the empire or the Islamic state of Amirul Mu'mineen included or encompassed 60 present day countries? Amirul Mu'mineen, yes, he was an imam appointed by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but in order to appreciate the gains and to appreciate the legacy that Amirul Mu'mineen left behind for us, for humanity to benefit, we sometimes need to look back in history and evaluate his position as a head of state. This head of state, whose capital is in Kufa, is leading a state which is equivalent to 60 present day countries. Traditionally speaking, when we read in the Ahadith, the land of Sham, what was the land of Sham? It was not only present day Syria. No, Damascus was the capital of Syria, but at that time Syria or Sham included Palestine, included Jordan, included the occupied Palestine, it included the present day Syria. Ya subhanallah, 5 present day countries included parts of Turkey as well. This was one province at that time, 5 present day countries. And similarly, Africa, when you read that Amirul Mu'mineen had sent his wali to Africa or to Misr, Misr being Egypt, traditionally at that time, Misr does not denote the present day Egypt. La, the part of the Islamic government that was present in Africa included the entire of North Africa, Algeria, up to Morocco, Egypt present day in its own, down to East Africa up to Ethiopia, which was known as Habasha at that time, was all collectively known as Misr, under the rule of Amir al-Mu'mineen. Do you know for these 4 odd years that Amir al-Mu'mineen was head of state, his economic policies were such that the only time in history that this big part of North Africa and East Africa had been poverty-free 1400 years ago? Under the time of Amir al-Mu'mineen, North and East Africa was a poverty-free zone. Ajib jiddan. Enter Janab, you go and tell somebody in a university or an academic or any economist that 1400 years ago there was a span of 3 to 4 years where North Africa and East Africa was a poverty-free zone. Saddiq, he believes you, Lola. Most of us are not aware of these achievements and this legacy that Amir al-Mu'mineen left behind for us. Why? How? Through economic policies given to us by an imam who is appointed by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The historians mention that within the 2nd year of the rule of Amir al-Mu'mineen, the Wali of Africa or the Wali of Misr sends additional khums back to Hijaz. Allahu Akbar. What does this mean? The standard of living of the people in Africa under the rule of Amir al-Mu'mineen was so much that in addition to their savings, these taxes, 20% of their savings which they had was access for the government, in that the infrastructure that existed during the day, the Wali did not need this money anymore. This khums was then being sent to Hijaz to cover up for the deficits that existed at that time during the Middle East. Ajib jiddan. When it comes to foreign policy, can you imagine that there was a time where Africa was not the recipient of foreign aid but was giving access in terms of its budget to other parts of the world? The legacy of Amir al-Mu'mineen. Who is there to show this approach and these teachings of Islam to the wider world? Janab, this is the responsibility of you and I, who call ourselves the Shias of Amir al-Mu'mineen, who take pride in our identity. Our entire identity exists around Ali ibn Abi Talib. Then we become, it is awla for us, more important for us, that we reflect the teachings of Amir al-Mu'mineen. Number one, we study the life of Amir al-Mu'mineen, the seerah of Amir al-Mu'mineen from every perspective, from fiqh, from akhlaq, from aqaid and kalam, ideology, but also in terms of politics and in terms of finance. Imam al-Rahma, wa ma arsalnaka illa rahmatan lil alameen. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about Rasulullah. Enta ya Rasulullah rahmatan lil alameen. You are a mercy not only to the Muslims but to the entire creation, in every aspect of their lives. And Amir al-Mu'mineen is nafsun Nabi as per the text of the Quran. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in Eid al-Mubahala, or in the verse of Mubahala, introduces Amir al-Mu'mineen. Subhanallah, sometimes you look at Amir al-Mu'mineen in the Quran itself. Ulama have written and have compiled tafasir of over 1,000 verses in the Quran that were revealed in honor of Amir al-Mu'mineen. And these even from ulama and mufassirin who are non-Shia. Ajib jiddan. Sometimes you find in the Quran that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala refers to Amir al-Mu'mineen as Yadullah. Sometimes you find here Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala refers to Amir al-Mu'mineen as being Aynullah. Sometimes you find Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala refers to Amir al-Mu'mineen as Khalifatullah fil ard, inni ja'ilun fil ardi khalifa, where the tafsir is Adam and the ta'wil is Amir al-Mu'mineen. But you find in the verse of Mubahala, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala introduces Amir al-Mu'mineen as being nafsun Nabi. فَقُلْ تَعَالَوْا نَدْعُ أَبْنَاءَنَا وَأَبْنَاءَكُمْ وَنِسَاءَنَا وَنِسَاءَكُمْ وَأَنفُسَنَا وَأَنفُسَكُمْ. Nafsun Nabi Amir al-Mu'mineen. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that Rasulullah is rahmatan lil alameen. Similarly, Amir al-Mu'mineen is rahmatan lil alameen. Rahmah in the way he administered this government that encompassed 60 present day countries. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. For the first reason that you find, or the first answer in terms of this first dimension of the tafsir, is that oppression, poverty and tyranny exists at an economic, political, financial level, social level, largely because we have submitted to man-made rules and neglected the ruling of Islam. And we need to introduce Islam as a power that gives positive global solutions to the entire of humanity. It is when people see the fa'idah of Islam as a religion that gives you prosperity in the deen as well as in the akhirah, this is when you find that the verse of the Quran comes into play. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. إِذَا جَاءَ نَصْرُ اللَّهِ وَالْفَتْحُ وَرَأَيْتَ النَّاسَ يَدْخُلُونَ فِي دِينِ اللَّهِ أَفْوَاجًا. How do they come into the religion in big throngs and in big numbers? When they see that there is a benefit for them in the dunya as well as in the akhirah. This is one. The second dimension, as per the tafasir, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, ظَهَرَ الْفَسَادُ فِي الْبَرِّ وَالْبَحْرِ بِمَا كَسَبَتْ أَيْدِ النَّاسِ. The other tafsir or the interpretation of the term Aidi Nas, man-made laws or man-made actions, is that people have fallen prey to corruption and poverty and oppression because they preferred to abide by culture and give it preference over Islam as a religion. To give priority to culture over Islam is one of the root causes of oppression. Culture, you find that there are some elements of culture that Islam accepts, but you find there are other elements of culture that in reality Islam as a whole came to abolish. One of the reasons why the people of Makkah, the mushrikeen of Makkah, stood up against Rasulullah in opposition was that the system Rasulullah had come into, he had challenged the standing culture of the day, which caused oppression and poverty. You find that during the time of Jahiliyyah, majority of the treatments that existed towards the women at that time are majority of the cases that exist today. You find that the ruling of Jahiliyyah, you find that ignorant cultures dictate the fact that, for example, a married woman a woman whose husband previously died, she has become a widow, cannot marry again. Enter Janab, count the number of cultures, whether it is within the subcontinent or outside the subcontinent. How many times have we come across a culture where it is almost a taboo for a widowed woman to get married again? Sahilola. The amount of issues that arise from a widow being unmarried. A woman, even though she might be in her 40s and in her 50s and even in her 60s, at the end of the day, Bani Adam, insan, she still needs this companionship. That Allah has not created her free of emotion. She needs a companion through which or with which she can live her life together. You find in previous subcontinent cultures, they had this culture known as the culture of Sati. Perhaps I'm mispronouncing it, but they had the culture known as the culture of Sati, whereby if a husband died, the widow who was left behind would also be burnt alive with her husband, such that she can live together with the husband in an afterworld, if that afterworld even exists. And as you know, in these cultures, there was no burial, there was cremation. Living human being. Some of the places where you find the cremation happens, they use, well, ayadu billah, butter. Siagi. They say in Swahili Siagi. I'm told a lot of people here speak Swahili. We make use of the Swahili Siagi, butter. To put butter on a living human being and place her between wooden blocks and burn her alive. Ya culture. Which culture? Which insanity? Which culture did this help? You find that even at that time and even after Islam, within cultures and societies that claim to be Muslims, you find that the woman who has become a widow, it is almost a taboo and it is made as if it is haram for her to remarry again. Islam came and abolished all this. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala through Rasulullah says, Man tazawwaja faqad istakmala nisf ad-din. The one who gets married has completed half his religion. Even for a woman who has previously lost her husband and she remarries again, this hadith is applicable to it, because the hadith is not muqayyad to those who are not married or those who are bachelors or spinsters. La. But you find that preference and abiding by culture at the expense of religion is a root cause for oppression. Similarly, when it comes to the issue of the mahar, subhanallah, we live at a time where the culture dictates that the mahar is a representation of the value of a woman. The higher the mahar, the more valuable a woman is when it comes to marriage. How many hard-working people, men or boys, muttaqeen, graduates from university or working, trying to make a decent halal living, are not able to get married because of exorbitant requirements when it comes to mahar. Islam came and abolished all this. In the first example, the Rasulullah himself married a number of widows from amongst his wives who were there. A number of them were widows. He came to abolish that practice. When it came to the issue of mahar, you find that Rasulullah within his hadith says that the best women from my ummah are those women who seek the most humble amount when it comes to mahar. The value of a woman is not attached to the mahar. This is in essence an insult to the woman. Which person can say that the value of my daughter is £1 million or $1 million? The life of a woman, the life of a daughter is supposed to be priceless, cannot be gained by any money. Yet we come and we become victims of this culture. We come and we place culture higher than Islam. Islam says, Innama akramakum indallahi atqakum. The value of a woman, the value of a man is not per his financial status or as per his mahar. The value of a person is attached to his iman and his taqwa. Akhlaq. Culture dictated. Islam came and dictated something else. How many cases of eligible people ready for marriage are not able to get married because of these cultural impediments? Had Islam been the norm and the deen a system through which we live our lives, majority of these cases and this fitna and fasad would not exist today. The examples in this field are numerous, but the second tafsir of this verse or this statement, ظهر الفساد في البر والبحر بما كسبت أيدي الناس, is the fact that people tend to prefer culture over the Islam. And say that as سيدة نساء العالمين فاطمة الزهراء صلوات الله وسلامه عليها اللهم صل على محمد points towards this fact, where she stands in her khutbah fadakiyya. Ahibba'i, khutbah fadakiyya is the madrasa in its own. The teachings that Sayyidat Nisa al-Alamin leaves behind for us. She addresses the people of Saqifa and she says to him, أَفَحُكْمَ الْجَاهِلِيَّةِ يَبْغُونَ? Do you prefer to adapt the rulings of the times of Jahiliyyah? What was Jahiliyyah? Culture, a set of rituals and customs that went against the benefit of man, that went against the benefit of humanity, that went against Islam. We are not saying that all culture in its entirety has no place. La, certain elements of culture are positive and beneficial and embraced by Islam. Our talk over here is when there are those elements that contradict with the teachings of Islam, and then the contradictory acts are given preference and priority over Islam. So this is one. And the one before that, we said submission of man-made laws when it comes to economic and financial and political policies. The third perspective in this tafsir. This third perspective, we understand it when we give to an answer to an atheist. So, from so far our conclusion has been, so far, that global poverty and tyranny and oppression exists because knowledge on its own is not sufficient and deen is not given its place. If religion was given a place and the teachings of Islam were taught and implemented in its entirety, we would not suffer a lot of the tragedies that we suffer today. This is our conclusion. An atheist comes forward and he tells you, Habibi, most of the conflict that we see in the world today is because of religion. How much bloodshed has been spilled because in the name of religion. Enter Janab, you look at the Middle East today. You look in almost every part of the Middle East, from Syria into Iraq, places of Lebanon, you find that the Middle East, the turmoil that exists there is primarily because of religion. Today, what we understand from the media, we're looking at this argument from the perspective of an atheist. This is not our perspective. We will come to our conclusion. But when you come and you look at the perspective from the perspective of an atheist or the perspective of a non-Muslim, majority of the wars and the bloodshed is due to the actions of the Muslims in itself. Iraq in itself today, which has become perhaps the most dangerous place in the world, at a place where we said 100 people being killed on a daily basis. This war which is happening there, is it not a war that is happening in the name of religion, that is happening in the name of Islam? Not only in the Middle East, in the Janab, closer to home, inside of Nigeria, do you not find the organizations such as Boko Haram? Boko Haram, when they come and they cause this bloodshed and all this unrest, are they not doing it in the name of Islam? They're doing it in the name of Islam. Closer to home even, come to Somalia, do you not find that Al-Shabaab are killing and causing havoc also in the name of Islam? Tayyib, when you come and you see that for the non-Muslim and the atheist, majority of his exposure to Islam is to an Islam that is violent in their eyes. And here we are telling them that majority of global issues can be solved through Islam. Contradiction. How do you reply back to an atheist in this situation, or to a non-believer in this situation? The third understanding of this verse, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, ظهر الفساد في البر والبحر بما كسبت أيدي الناس. Fasad and oppression, corruption. But under corruption we can use the terms, because fasad in mantiq, they say, is a kulli, is a general concept, and there are a number of misdaq. From this is poverty, and from this is oppression, and from this is tyranny. Ala kulli, majority of this oppression and corruption that we see today is because people decided to interfere with the divinity of this religion. When people come and distort the teachings of the religion, we say that corruption has happened. This, what you see in the world today, this picture of a so-called Islam, whether it is in the hands of militants such as ISIS or militants such as Al-Shabaab or Boko Haram, is this the Islam of Rasulullah and the Islam of Ahlul Bayt? La. These are people who took an understanding of Islam which was outside the Islam of Ahlul Bayt. This corruption and this manipulation and distortions of the teachings of Rasulullah and Ahlul Bayt, the product of all these distorted teachings are terrorist organizations such as these. This is the Islam of Bani Umayyah and the Islam of Bani Abbas, not the Islam of Ahlul Bayt. So we come forward in our defense and we tell the people that within Islam there are certain organizations politicians or certain personalities who came and distorted the pure teachings of Islam to come and show people a deviated form of Islam. Man-made action, man-made interference within the affairs of the religion that has brought about poverty and corruption and global bloodshed. And this is what Sayyidati Nisa al-Alameen pointed towards in her khutbah Fadakiya. When she stands in front of the people of Saqifa and she quotes this verse of the Quran, أَفَغَيْرِ الْإِسْلَامِ, do you prefer a religion other than Islam? Why did she say that you are changing the Islam and you are preferring another version of this Islam? فَمَنْ يَبْتَغِي غَيْرَ الْإِسْلَامَ دِينًا فَلَنْ يُقْبَلْ. The one, she quoted this verse of the Quran, the one who desires to take a religion other than Islam, Allah shall never accept from it. Why did Sayyidat Nisa al-Alameen quote this verse against the people of Saqifa? This khutbah Fadakiya was delivered in the masjid of Rasulullah, Masjid al-Nabawi. The people that she was addressing were so-called Muslims, but she is telling them that if you take a religion other than the religion of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it shall not be accepted and you shall open the doors of all the corruption. Why did she mention this verse? Because the Islam of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is that Islam that has stipulated after Rasulullah, the first Imam is going to be Amirul Mu'mineen Ali ibn Abi Talib. Salawatullahi wa salamuhu alayhi. For every person who comes in and tries to cause a disbalance or a misbalance in this equilibrium is going to distort and corrupt the religion to an extent that generations later, until the day of judgment, we shall see the effect of this corruption within the religion. These are people who usurped the position of Khilafah for personal gains. In order to gain leadership over the entire Ummah, they sidelined that person who was appointed as the Khalif of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala by Allah. And you find today, this is the rampant issue that we face, in that religion is seen as nothing more as a vehicle or as a tool to gain personal gains. This is where the corruption within the religion lies. To manipulate the religion to make personal gains. And if you look at every organization that sheds blood under the name of Islam, you dig just a little bit deeper and you find that there are far-reaching political agendas or economic agendas which they seek to achieve. But because they have no legitimate means to achieve these goals, they use the religion as a vehicle and distort this religion, at the same time destroying the image in its entirety. And the door of all this corruption was the event of Saqifa. How can you and I be safe from oppression? A poet says, how can you and I be free from oppression when the daughter of Rasulullah was not free of oppression? Allah, Allah. Ahibai, tonight being the first night of these majalis al-Mubarak al-Fatemiya, inshallah we shall begin these blessed majalis with the dhikr of the masa'ib of Sayyidah Ruqayyah, or the way we know her as Sayyidah Sakina, this 3-year daughter of Sayyid al-Shuhada. Before we start her masa'ib, if we can have a loud salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. narrates that upon the Shahada of Rasulullah, upon the Shahada of Imam al-Hussein in the plains of Karbala, the women and the children were left alone to be persecuted and to be oppressed by the enemies. Not only were their tents burnt, not only were they physically hit, not only were their possessions looted, but they were taken to be prisoners from the land of Karbala to the land of Kufa, from Kufa to Sham. Allah, the tradition mentions that the family, the women of Ahlul Bayt, were tied with ropes around their hands and ropes around their necks. From amongst the prisoners who were there was a little girl, the daughter of Hussein, by the name of Ruqayya or by the name of Sakina. The tradition mentions that at one time while they were made to walk through the desert, Sayyidah Ruqayya would look at her Auntie Zainab. She would say, Auntie Zainab, my feet are paining from the amount of walking. I cannot walk anymore. Allah, this 3-year-old girl walking in the deserts on the burning sands, her feet being pierced by the thorns. At one time she was not able to walk. Because she was not able to walk, the Maktal says that one of the enemies by the name of Shumar al-La'in came and began to slap this 3-year-old girl. Allah, the Masira of the companions or the Masira of the Sabaya went until it ended in Sham. After the Darbar of Yazid, the women and the children were put in a dungeon in Sham. Allah, Ahibai, I want to take your hearts tonight back into the haram of Sayyidah Sakina, the haram of Sayyidah Ruqayya in Sham. Allah, may Allah give us an opportunity to do the ziyarah of Sayyidah Ruqayya. Ilahi Amin. The narration mentions that on one of the nights, Sayyidah Ruqayya, this 3-year-old daughter of Imam al-Hussein, Sayyidah Zainab put her to sleep. After a lot of difficulty, she made this young girl go to sleep. This young girl who has seen the body of her father being trampled by horses. This young girl who has been whipped and lashed all the way from Karbala to Sham. Finally, she goes to sleep. Sayyidah Zainab sees that this daughter has gone to sleep. She goes towards the side of the jail to recite her tahajjud, to recite her salat, the salatul layl. Allah, as Sayyidah Zainab is about to do her takbir, this young girl Ruqayya wakes up and she begins to cry in the loudest voices. She says, oh Auntie Zainab, I want my father Hussein. Sayyidah Zainab, how do you tell this young girl that your father is not going to come back? Sayyidah Zainab says to her, my daughter Ruqayya, your father has gone on a journey. Keep patient, you will see him after some time. Sayyidah Ruqayya looks at her Auntie Zainab. She says, oh Auntie Zainab, I saw my father Aba Abdullah in a dream tonight, and he said that I will be reunited with him. I shall not stop crying until I see my father. Allah. On the other side, Yazid al-La'in is in his palace. He wakes up due to the heavy crying. He calls the guard and he asks, why is there all this noise? Why is there all this crying that has woken me up from my sleep? Allah, the guard says to her that there is a little girl, a yatima, who is crying for her father in the dungeon. Look at Yazid al-Hakir. He says to the guard, if this is the case, increase the pain of this young girl by sending the beheaded head of this girl's father. Allah, this guard goes, he takes the blessed head of Imam al-Hussein unattached. It is covered with a cloth. The guard comes into the darbar. Allah, ya Shia. The girl looks at the tasht. She says, I do not want any food, I want my father. The guard removes the cover from the tasht, and over here is the beheaded head of Abu Abdullah. Allah, Sayyidah Ruqayya takes this head of Imam al-Hussein. She looks at it, she kisses it on the forehead, and then she would hug it. She looks at the head of Imam al-Hussein. She says, she says, oh father, who is the one who has dyed your beard with blood? She says, she says, oh father, who has made me into an orphan at this young age? Sakina keeps crying and crying until there is no more sound that comes out from this young girl. Sayyida Zainab thinks perhaps the young girl is gone to sleep. At this point, Imam Zain al-Abidin stands up. He says, Amma Zainab, begin the weeping, for indeed this girl has